Let us move towards our second session for the day. I'm personally extremely excited for this one. It is something that all of us can relate to. The title of the session is Russia-Ukraine War and Lessons About It. And as the author for this session, we are extremely honored to have Lieutenant General Raj Shukla ji with us. मैं चाहूँगा उनके presence के लिए जोरदार तालियां होनी चाहिए. General Shukla has seen extensive service in the field. He commanded an infantry brigade in counter-insurgency along the line of control in the Kashmir Valley and a private corps along the western borders. A professional aviator, General Shukla has an abiding interest in strategic and military affairs. He has participated in more than 200 talks and seminars in India and abroad as a guest, including the Chandigarh Military Lit Fest and the Jaipur Lit Fest. In recognition of his services of the most exceptional order, the officer was awarded the Param Vishishta Seva Medal on Republic Day 2021. Indeed, a matter of great privilege for all of us. And the Honorable President was pleased to appoint Lieutenant General Raj Shukla ji to the Union Public Service Commission on 18 July 2022. And as I previously said, sir, it's a great matter for us to be having you. मैं चाहूँगा जोरदार तालियों से उनका स्वागत इस मंच पे किया जाए. He is the former security advisor to the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, advisor to the Government of Seychelles, advisor to the National Highways Authority of India, and the President of the Service Selection Board, Ministry of Defence, Government of India. He is a distinguished professor at the SRM University, Chennai, a visiting faculty at IMT Ahmedabad, and a master trainer in soft skills with ICI, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and a self-development coach. And let me also tell you, he is a regular speaker on TV. He speaks regularly on international geopolitics. He was also invited by NATO to speak on Kashmir along with the Pak former Defense Secretary. You would have surely seen him on various English and Hindi TV news channels. And the President of India has awarded him twice for gallantry, the Sena Medal. जोरदार तालियां उसके लिए होनी चाहिए. And also, it may interest for some of you to know that he has also been shot in a combat. He was wounded in Kashmir, and his hair all suited up, and we are extremely excited to see him carry forward this conversation. I would request both the gentlemen to please be here on the dais. जोरदार तालियां होनी चाहिए उनके स्वागत के लिए. A matter of great honor for all of us to have two great warriors of the nation who have served the nation in the best capacity possible. And I would request the dignitaries to please ignite this most awaited and wonderful discussion on the Russia-Ukraine war. Over to you, gentlemen.
General Raj Shukla, I know him for about 50 years. How's that? We are from the same school, and we used to go for debates up to the national level together, etc. And I'm so happy to see, I retired 8 years ago, he blossomed into a very intelligent and very intellectually perspicaciously clear thinking general. And more than the book where he has a chapter, if you Google on YouTube and you see his views on a variety of subjects including space, etc., the perspicaciousness of his vision. And by the way, he was the General Officer Commanding in Chief of the Army Training Command, which is very futuristic looking. So we will gain from his benefit today, and without further ado, I want to straight away jump into the first question. And what I definitely want to do, it is now 11:05, we have 40 minutes. I want audience to have an opportunity to ask questions, not that time is running short. And therefore, with that as a background, I want to pose the first question to you, Raj, which is, with the Ukraine war, the very character of warfare changed. And therefore, what do you think is the geopolitical implications of this ongoing conflict? We are analyzing it as it is still on for almost a year. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you very much for the organizers of the Lit Fest and to you, sir, for having invited me here to this festival and to this lovely city, Bhopal. The Ukraine conflict, I mean, we've been reading about it. A lot of people have written about it, commentated on it. But insofar as the geopolitical implications are concerned, let me preface it by saying that it is actually a watershed of many sorts. And there are valuable lessons that we can draw in international affairs, from the standpoint of statecraft and war fighting. You see, the first thing that has happened, in my view, is that this long-standing norm against territorial conquest was breached. Now, you will say, of course, there were many conflicts raging in Africa, in the Middle East, but nothing quite like this. A conflict between two big powers. Russia might be the weak great power, but two great powers. The first major conflict after World War II, the first major conflict in Europe, the first major conflict where we saw the prospect of a nuclear conflagration. And let me tell you that Putin's nuclear card is working. The West has fought shy of getting into Russia for these very reasons. One major reason that Ukraine is not being given the kind of weaponry that it would need, like Leopard tanks and longer range missiles, is because of the nuclear factor. So after a long time, you see, it seemed that the global order was being challenged. This is long established global order. What it has led to is that in the rebalancing of various tools of influence and coercion, like economics, diplomacy, and the military has got re-emphasized. And the instrument of force, which for a very long time was peripheral to a nation's power calculus, seems to be getting to the center of that power calculus, which might not be a good thing, but it is a fact. And let me just, emphasize this point with some statistics. NATO has started deploying forward. It has got into ramping up its defense production, cutting edge capacities. It was this NATO which the Americans dubbed as no action talk only in Iraq and Afghanistan. When patrols from a certain country were asked to patrol, they said, we don't patrol by night. When they were asked to give troops, they offered dogs. It is this NATO which has now got into a serious fight. You look at defense budgets, Japan, 2%, 1,000 missile force. NATO has got, to 2%. Germany's defense commitment to Ukraine is larger than France. They've given a whole lot of armor fighting vehicles and other kind of stuff, and not only helmets now, there is this huge discussion of giving Leopard tanks. Sweden and Finland, which had been neutral for decades, have now gone to NATO. A country like Hungary is holding the line on sanctions. And you see, it's not very visible, but we see these, an emergence of battle lines between these two types of world orders. The ones that are protagonists of the current world order and those that are challenging it. So this, and just one last point I would like to make. So it would seem to me that we are very much in the midst of Cold War 2.0. And Ukraine is the first hot war in Cold War 2.0. which is again not good news, but a lot could happen in the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere. And just one more quick point. You look at the conflict diets. Cold War I, you had USA, Soviet Union. Then you got to a unipolar world where the prospect of large conflict declined. And now you have two conflict diets, one in Europe and one possibly around Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific. And just one last point, that if the implications of Ukraine are so cataclysmic, just imagine what would happen in a US-China contingency, just because of one reason, in the manner in which China is integrated into the global economy. China's GDP is 10 times that of Russia. Its exports in manufacturing are 20%. Russian exports were only at 8%. Chinese banks assets 30 times that of Russia. So if a conflict breaks out and you have, look at its effect on the economy. So these are, I think, many of the very large implications in Europe, in the world, and they could be, there is every prospect of them impacting India.
So what are the defining features of this conflict? And before you answer that, just let me elaborate on 2-3 points he made. He said this fight is between two big powers, and I'm sure you realize that apart from Russia, the second big power is exactly. It was a tough thing from 16th February onwards for us to put this across on TV that this is not a Russia-Ukraine war, which America still calls it. It is actually a USA-Russia war, with Ukraine being the proxy and the unfortunate battlefield. The second thing he spoke about was rules-based order, a favorite phrase with the West, which means a Western-imposed Bretton Woods legacy unfair world order. The rules are favorable to a small section. The entire Africa is ignored, and broadly the entire global South is ignored. The third thing he spoke about was NATO expansion. I would love that some of you do the search. In my own talks, I show the maps, the truth, and how the West shows that truth, and how the truth as I see it and the people who are critical of the West see it. 1997 is the watershed whereafter 14 countries were added to NATO. Will India accept China sitting in Nepal? So how can Russia accept NATO forces sitting on its doorstep when it already has Turkey as a NATO country? So these are some of the issues there. And lastly, when he spoke about defense budgets, just let me give you the numbers here. China is 17.1 trillion. And India, because I want to ultimately come back, what's in it for India in this entire war? India is at 3.2 trillion presently, aspiring for 5 trillion in a certain time frame. Yeah. So what is the defining features of this conflict, Raj?
Usse pehle, can I just say one thing on this world order business? I am not certainly backing the Western perception of the world order. In fact, I would like to join into what Sanjay just said. What provoked this conflict is also something we must look at. Did the West go too far east, or were the eastern countries, wanting to genuinely turn west? So that's a question that will have to be answered. If America can have its own exclusive Western hemisphere, why can't the Chinese have their hemisphere in the Indo-Pacific? Why can't the Russians have their own hemisphere? So these questions will get asked, and these debates will arise as you look at the changing world order. 2 quick points about this changing character of war. ये भी बड़ा important है. देखिए इंडिया में भी ये बात होने लगी थी 10 साल पहले कि लड़ाई नहीं होने वाली. All out conflict has come to an end. This myth has been shattered. The Russian generals told Putin 72 घंटे में साहब हम कीव पहुंच जाएंगे. Surgical occupation of Kiev. It is 1 year now and no sign of the conflict ending. So लड़ाई खत्म नहीं हुई है, लड़ाई का स्वरूप बदल रहा है. The character of war is changing, and militaries have to be discerning and fleet-footed to see how that change is manifesting. And this other thing, militaries flatter to deceive. I went to a land warfare conference in London in 2018, where the entire West was talking of the Russian military as the second most powerful military in the world, as this very smart leverager of the Gerasimov doctrine, a brilliant IW power. You see how it is unraveled? Far from being the second largest military, most powerful military in the world, even it was, I mean, in the former Soviet Union, it's not certain whether it is the best military. Ukraine is proving better. So military is flatter to deceive unless they are. That gives rise to the question that is the PLA a parade ground military? Is it social media fluff? If it is social media fluff, we shouldn't worry. But if it is not, and I think it is not, then there is a lot to worry. As far as, the features of conflict are concerned, there are so many of them. You go to the net, you will find hundreds. Let me just point to 2-3 of them. One is private sector participation, and this is really game-changing. Private sector, not only in terms of capacity building, but war fighting. What saved Ukraine, at least in the initial phase, were Elon Musk's Starlink terminals. Zelensky used those Starlink terminals when the net was down, communication was down, to communicate with global councils, with UN, with the American Congress, with the European Parliament. He used them to prop up troop morale, street resolve, and also for designation of artillery fire. Peter Thiel's Palantir, the algorithms, have been used, wonderfully in intelligence and battle management, which actually points to a larger point, that national security today is so complicated that you need people of the caliber of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. The US Space Command today is partnering not with NASA, but with Elon Musk. And this whole thing in the context of our own Atmanirbharta has to be understood. It is about getting innovation, energy, creativity, enterprise into national security because it is so competitive, otherwise things will not happen. The other thing which might not interest this audience but would be of great value to military audiences is how air power has been underwhelming. I mean, I've not been able to find out why, but all Western doctrines, including the Indian doctrine, was premised on air power getting in, establishing air supremacy, and then the land battle flowing. It's just not happened. Because once again, of the democratization of the airspace, it's not only fighters, but it is drones. So the future perhaps is in, hybrid fleets, so on and so forth. And the last point is a pointer to people like me. The lack of generalship in the Russian military, which is a very serious point. I mean, it was very lackluster. There was lack of creativity, innovation, critical thinking, the way the whole thing, the Kiev disaster and the slogs thereafter, their inability to speak truth to power, which is so important, a quality of generalship. And therefore you found these, great strategic expectations of Putin colliding with tactical reality. So there's so many lessons, but insofar as the character and the principal features of the conflict, I just thought I'll point to these 3.
I think that's very well rounded up on these 2 questions of the changing character of the war, the implications of the war, and the defining characters of this ongoing, and I stress on ongoing, war. What I would like to say is something, when I was in J&K, I've been 14 years there, 7 years in the Northeast, I realized लड़ाई फौजियों की अकेली नहीं है, ये तो सरकार की भी है. It's not a Fauji alone, it's all of government. And then I became the security advisor to the Home Ministry, and I got involved, amongst other things, with the Naxal issues, of which this audience would know something, because Chhattisgarh earlier was a part of Madhya Pradesh, Jagdalpur, and those Abu Jmar areas are something. I have been there very frequently, you all have heard of them. I then said, war, somebody had asked a very good question, changing perspectives and changing identities. So this is my example of changing perspective with the same identity. War is not only for government. It's an all of country approach. And now with the Ukraine war, we all always knew that international opinion, narrative, influence mattered. In 71 war, Indira Gandhi had gone around and made it in our favor. But the Ukraine war has proved it all the more. It's not only all of country now, it is very much you have to take the world along with you. This to me is one of the major characteristics and changes in the war that have happened. All of world approach to a war. And peace is not the absence of conflict. This war is going to carry on. Whether the body bags increase fast, slow, or stagnate, this war is not going to finish. People have invested, both sides, too much into it. And I will straight away come to the next question for General Shukla, which is looking at this war and the aspects that we have discussed, at the back of all our minds is हमारा दुश्मन कौन है? कौन है? कौन है? So I was waiting for a few people to say Pakistan, and I'm happy that you haven't said it. They have. You see, we should get to thinking beyond Pakistan and start thinking of China a lot more seriously. And therefore, I want to now ask General Shukla, because he has done a lot of thinking, speaking work on China as well. Keeping the lessons and what we spoke about Ukraine in the backdrop, what are your views on the lessons for India with respect to the Chinese threat?
Before that, since we have a very young audience here, can I just say one thing? This is not a recruitment platform, but what I want to tell you is that, national security too needs very good thinking minds. The army is, of course, a great deal about brawn, but it is equally about brains. And the armed forces are a wonderful career for people who think they can optimize brain and brawn. India is not only a land of spiritual thinkers, but some very fine strategic minds. Let me give you the clairvoyance, of say Chanakya, who said many years back, कि अगर अपने शास्त्र को भूलोगे तो अपनी संस्कृति खो दोगे, पर अगर शस्त्र का त्याग करोगे तो राष्ट्र ही खो दोगे. Such perspicacity on the role of the instrument of force in a nation's power calculus. जो हम questions पूछते हैं कि भाई ये गलवान क्यों हो गया, ये हो गया, these should not be the questions asked. An empowered India should ask the questions that why did our deterrence fail? Why did he dare to do this? The question is not why Putin attacked Ukraine. The question is why did Western deterrence fail? Why did Western deterrence fail that emboldened Putin to attack? तो जब हम विकसित भारत की बात करते हैं, विश्व गुरु की बात करते हैं, while everything else is hugely important, economics, technology, science, so is the instrument of force, and it needs to be nursed in wise, thoughtful ways. That's why we need, good minds and the young crowd here. As far as the...
Just permit me to add one sentence here. This is my common one, so I don't want to forget saying it. Soft power alone is not enough. It has to have the backing of hard power. And military power is a significant component of hard power. Manufacturing capability, patents, intellectual capability, supply chain, logistic prowess, this is all hard power. Military prowess is an important part of hard power. Please continue.
So see, this somebody said Pakistan. My view, and I'll elaborate on it during the question answer. But very briefly, Pakistan is a pest. China is the threat. Pakistan की economy क्या है? Bombay GDP Bombay के stock exchange से कम है. So it should not seriously bother us. This does not mean hubris. I mean, militarily we have to look at it seriously. But China is the challenge. You see, as I've said, if China is merely a parade ground military, if it is social media fluff, it shouldn't bother us. But everything on record tells us that it is not. And therefore, we must address the Chinese challenge with, as I say, thought, a futuristic outlook, vision, because the game with China is long. Can we do it? look at the lessons from Ukraine. The asymmetric balancing of China is very much possible. मैं आपको एक उदाहरण देता हूँ, या दो उदाहरण देता हूँ. The Russian defense budget was 10 times that of Ukraine. Unki, you forget the larger inventory, just take armor, 6 times that of Ukraine. Look what happened. I mean, from Zelensky to the ballerinas, the whole nation has come together. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and look what Ukraine is doing. Another example, for those who are more seriously inclined. America's defense budget is 3 times that of China. China's defense budget is 3 times that of ours. Yet why is it that China is causing serious displacement anxiety in Washington and we are not causing the same anxiety in Beijing? It is not a function of budgets alone. The larger reforms, if you don't get theater commands going, if you don't integrate, हम jointmanship की बात कर रहे हैं. The world has moved on. Today it's no longer jointmanship, it is jointmanship, integration, cross-pollination, civil-military fusion. Best talent and attributes from the civil and military world coming together. Our civilizations have suggested that. When they spoke about the convergence of Saraswati, Lakshmi and Durga, या Saraswati, Lakshmi का और Durga का मिश्रण, it is wisdom. It says that read, write, research, publish, patent, turn knowledge into wealth. So Saraswati gives you Lakshmi. Respect these centers of wealth. I think Mr. Chandrasekhar was making that point. Get them into your national security apparatus like Musk and Thiel. Innovation, enterprise. And then get these productive, sophisticated, technologically enabled instruments of power. हमारे सामने चुनौती क्या है चाइना के सामने? We have to create an instrument of force which is joint, which is technologically enabled, which is calibrated and which is ready. So simple, 4 words. But jointness को 30 साल हो गए. Where are we? Technological enablement, if you get into AI today, in the military realm, fruits will come 30 years hence. Readiness, Russia, मैंने आपको मिसाल दी. Second largest, most powerful military, is proved to be hugely unready. So I'm trying to tell you that in the national security space, these one-word descriptors take decades to transform. And let me now tell you why China is such a serious challenge. Just give you some statistics. Since 1990, the Chinese PLA has grown 44 times. It's not a linear growth. This is a study done by Hoover Institution in terms of various metrics. Some say it has undergone the most massive military modernization in the history of mankind. History of mankind. Chinese ideologues अभी कहते हैं साहब wealth बहुत हो गई. They say Mao gave us revolution, Deng gave us wealth, Xi will restore us to greatness. Greatness. The time has come to convert this wealth into power. Therefore Taiwan, therefore claim what they think is legitimately theirs along the LAC. The plan to the PLA Navy is our neighbor in the IOR. तो आज जो आप LAC में देख रहे हैं 10 साल बाद you may have the strategic squeeze from the LAC and the seas. Look at their rocket force, strategic support force. वो खुद कहते हैं that there can be only one tiger on a hill, one regional hegemon. I'll give you a very interesting quote from an Australian commentator, Gary Clintworth. Allow me to quote him. He says, China perceives India to be an ambitious, overconfident, military powerful neighbor with whom it will eventually have a day of reckoning. Yet China denies India as a potential rival on the shrewd calculation that why give India importance unnecessarily. तो अगर ये हकीकत है, if any of this I say is, I say is right, it is a serious rival. The Chinese threat is deep, it is complex, it is sophisticated. We have to play this long game with China. And just one last point. Are the Chinese 12 feet tall? Certainly not. हमने दिखा दिया, गलवान में दिखा दिया. We've shown it in Yangtze most recently. We showed it in 67 when Sagat led troops in Nathula. But we have to do a lot more because he is a smart cookie. अच्छी चीजें कर रहा है, इतनी गहरी चीजें कर रहा है. I'll just give you a small example of the Chinese PLA's transition from what I call humility to hubris. 15 साल पहले, the chairman of the NDU said that we are reading every word that Andrew Marshall writes. We are translating all his texts, implementing them in our studies. Who was Andrew Marshall? A strategic thinker, an American strategic thinker who advised 8 presidents across the aisle. Xi has personally led China's professional military education program. That was humility. जब उनको कुछ नहीं पता था, but सीखने के लिए तैयार थे. Today there is hubris. When you speak to them on this law of seas, ये वो 12 nautical mile जो अमेरिका उनको सिखाता है, वो कहते हैं अभी आप रुक जाइए. 12 nautical miles you are teaching us. You made this world, these rules when we were not part of the order. Now we will write the order. And they say in any case by 2035, the question will not be whether American ships stay 12 nautical miles of Shanghai. The question will be whether Chinese ships will stay 12 nautical miles of California.
So with
Humility
this,
to hubris. तो ये रास्ता हमको तय करना है. This is the journey that we have to travel if we have to take.
तो अगर ये रास्ता हमको तय करना है, what should India do to respond and to transform?
तो चलिए, so that's the last question. I think it's a good way to wind up. Given the ballooning strategic uncertainties around us, and I pointed that out, LAC, Western Theater Command में उतने ही खतरे हैं जो Eastern Theater Command में हैं. Opposite Taiwan, I don't see any distinction between the two in terms of capacities, infrastructure, so on and so forth. There is no evidence to suggest militarily that Taiwan is more important. Though, I mean, I quite appreciate the diplomatic readings and the other readings of Chinese intent. They do point towards that. I've told you about the dangers along the western horizons. The Pakistan is a threat. Terror could recoalesce. Hind Mahasagar mein kya ho raha hai? That is there. So given these ballooning strategic uncertainties around us and what has happened in Ukraine, the surest guarantor of peace, as I said, is an instrument of force which is joint, which is calibrated, which is technologically enabled, which is ready, and which is a huge challenge. For the reasons that I said, we have to create a war-winning instrument in the highest state of combat readiness. Russian military say, yeah, it is not easy, not easy. So while we're doing all the things that we have to do, we have to make 4 transformations. Technological, a transformation of talent, asymmetric balancing, or civil-military fusion. कुछ का मैंने जिक्र किया है, just let me elaborate on 1 or 2 of them. Look at technologies. They have been so game-changing in the national security context. एक बहुत बढ़िया किताब है Chris Miller की on the chip war. Do read it. The youngsters must read it. Look at the mistakes that we make in history. Soviet Union lost the Cold War to America in the military realm because of their failure to miniaturize computing power. Computing power that led to less accuracies in missiles. Putin restructures, what shall I say, the Russian resurgence on the basis of a military, makes the same critical mistake. No investment in chips. जब से वेस्ट ने ये sanctions लगाए हैं जनवरी से, 30 Russian military systems, 450 components are showing declining effectiveness, from radios to missiles. So the importance of a chip in war fighting. If World War II was about steel and aluminum, the next war will be about chips. We have a semiconductor mission which has just taken off. आप AI की बात कर लीजिए. China today is investing in these 4 stacks of compute, algorithm, engineering, and one more which I forget, the youngsters would know. It is directly translating into military benefits in sensors, command and control, logistics, fires. तो ये सब अभी हवा की बातें नहीं हैं, they are happening on ground. Similarly, I can give you other examples of blockchain, robotics, so on and so forth. So technological transformation बहुत ज़रूरी है. दूसरी transformation talent, ये बड़े ध्यान से सुनिएगा. Look at what Xi says on talent. He says China and the PLA need extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. He says the contest between superpowers is primarily one of talent. And a typical Chinese proverb, he quotes it and says, because without talent, it is like a fountain with no water and a tree with no roots. And what do they go and do? सिर्फ बोल नहीं है, उसके पीछे आगे क्रिया है. They structured this 1,000 talent plan. एक बहुत बढ़िया किताब निकली है Ian Easton की, which is on China's global strategy. I mean, you read it, it's mind-boggling. There is a Politburo document which says what should be done to the PLA to get talent and technology going. And who are they targeting? One gentleman they target is Dr. Frank Chen Ning Yang. He is a Nobel Prize in Physics, winner of the Albert Einstein Medal. His mentor was Enrico Fermi, the man who designed the nuclear reactor, Edward Teller, the guy who designed the hydrogen bomb. They honeypot him, get him into the PLA. The issue is not honeypotting. The issue is they are targeting Nobel laureates. Nobel laureates. The mission of the 1,000 talent plan says to recruit geniuses from the world who can nurse the PLA. So geniuses from the world. So talent, technology. I spoke of asymmetric balance, civil military fusion. These are the transformations that we need to make. A
lot of ground General Shukla has covered on this. And sometimes I feel there is a lot of hype about our achievements. And we seem to forget that old saying, speak softly but carry a big stick. A very good example of India doing this was in 2017 against China. In Doklam, did you notice there was no chota mota neta, there was no military except the authorized spokesperson, there was no politician, no bureaucrat, no military who made statements. 73 days China blinked first. So speak softly. I am addressing what India should do in the overall perspective of the China thing. Speak softly, which we are doing, and our actions should speak louder than our words.
You know,
the second thing,
just why quote Roosevelt? I think Mahatma Gandhi said, "True power speaks softly. It has no reason to shout."
And the second thing I want to tell you, I had always been saying in my so many talks that China is the leader in API, that is the pharmaceutical ingredients. Though we are supposed to be the pharma leader because we manufacture the medicine, the API, the ingredients to manufacture, it comes from China. Till 2 months ago I read that India was the leader in API also. और भारत ने इस चीज में अपना प्रभुत्व वरदान में चाइना को दिया 20 साल पहले. How sad. So this is what we are doing now, trying to get it all back. Proof. Look at the vaccine production in India. And geopolitical, when I spoke of influence, the vaccine Maitri program. And now the Chinese vaccine hasn't worked. China is having a major corona problem today, and as of day before yesterday, they are through side mechanisms getting Western Pfizer and Moderna medicines inside. Indian vaccine is working, Chinese is a question mark. The last thing I want to tell you what we should do, whatever we are talking about, these are slogans for the public, they are deep. Atmanirbharta. Gati Shakti. Gati Shakti, that project has 7 verticals to improve the connectivity, and when you apply it holistically, it is changing India's position in the war. So with this, I would now continue this discussion based on questions from the audience, which I will request General Shukla to address. Yes, please. Yeah, somebody to give them a mic. Otherwise, you have to say your name and speak loud enough so that all can hear.
First of all, Jain sir, my name is Amit Kumar Upadhyay, and my question to you is that, can you throw some light on the Russian oil and gas games? Basically, you can see that the European Union has already dwindled, and European Union wanted to put oil price caps, and basically they wanted Russians to sell it for like $63 per barrel. But Russia has found a way to torment them off. So I would like you to throw some light on it.
Okay. So we answer each question?
Yeah.
All right. So see, I have a few perspectives. Of course, I'm not an energy expert, but briefly, I mean, this is also one of the lessons from the Ukraine war, which is that everything is getting weaponized in this whole strategic hardball. So grains are getting weaponized, information is getting weaponized, energy is getting weaponized. But see, I think the fatal mistake that Europe made, Merkel thought that if you strengthen economic integration with Russia, and the energy metric was one of those metrics, it will deter Russia. Economic power will deter. Now, economic sanctions have had a great effect. It was estimated that they will make the Russian economy contract 10 times. That's not happened. Or a 4% contraction has happened as of November. But look at the failures of the economic card. It failed to deter. Then it said that, with the influence of the oligarchs and all, the Russian economy will be thrown into a major turmoil. That didn't happen. On the contrary, Putin used this dependence to fund the Russian war machine. The selling of energy has done that. It has propelled Europe into an energy transition. But the larger issue is this, that it is a very important metric, and in our entire statecraft, we have to see how we can wean off our own dependence on these hydrocarbons and move to renewables and all that.
So to address your energy question, which is an important question, remember 2-3 things. One, over-dependence on Russia by Europe is now being countered by America by selling its own gas at 2.5 times the cost. Who wins? America. Who loses? Europe. Second, because America, having failed to beyond a point leverage Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Caucasus region, they are now wanting the Middle East to give them the energy, which is our traditional sourcing. So the Middle East prices have gone up. And our External Affairs Minister has made this point very strongly in all international fora. Third on the energy thing is, please see the hypocrisy of the entire Europe. They were scrapping their coal and now they are all reviving it with Germany in the lead. And the last point here is Portugal and Italy. Because Portugal has a very long coastline, they are becoming important for the American liners to come in, because gas cannot be transported as gas, it has to be liquefied, which means cooled, which is an expensive proposition. More on this later. Other questions, please.
Yes. Next question, please, there. Yes. Next question to General Raj Shukla ji. Yes, please.
Jai Hind, sir. This is Vineet Nahata here. I would like to know from you that is the Russia-Ukraine war a blessing in disguise for the Indian defense manufacturing sector, be it private sector as well as public sector? The companies like Hindustan, HAL, BML, BDL, Mazgaon Dock, Kochi Shipyard. I have been told that the defense exports have risen from 3,000 crores some 6 years back to 17,800 crores presently. So who are the countries where we are exporting our ammunition or our war artillery produced by our indigenous companies? Second is, what is the role of private sector to play? And the other question is that our defense outlay in the overall as a percentage of GDP, is it commensurate with the state of the art, what ideally it should be, or is there a gap?
I would just...
So good questions, each deserves a long answer. General Shukla will do the best in the time available.
Okay, so, I mean, there are many lessons from the Russian-Ukraine war, and one is, I think, embedded in the first question that you asked. There are, of course, many distinguished diplomats here, but I would venture to say that we must seriously revisit the metrics of our strategic autonomy. If you have a dependency of 60, 70, 80%, which is what the Army, Air Force and the Navy are on the Russians, it's not a very good state to be in. So that is one. You also see you are depending on a military which itself, I gave you this example of chips. They themselves are getting strangulated because they are perhaps legacy and not technologically, shall I say, modern enough. We have already started doing it. If you pattern the purchases in recent 4-5 years, we have moved. I mean, Rafales is not Russian, the C-130 is not Russian, the howitzers that we bought are not Russians. But the last point is Atmanirbharta. You see, it's not an empty slogan of self-reliance. Let me paraphrase the Prime Minister. He says, it is to, and I'm paraphrasing him, not quoting him, it is to liberate the forces of innovation, energy and enterprise from the scourge of process and procedure. Whom is he pointing to? Private sector and startups getting them in. Now, last 3 to 4 years, and I was personally involved in this, there has been a huge change. You have a lot of defense startups, from drones to, detectors, guidance codes, a whole lot of this stuff is happening. But a lot more needs to be happen in the context of the China challenge. It is my view that unless private sector comes in wholeheartedly, the Chinese challenge cannot be met. I spoke to you about talent, what Z is saying. We want the private sector not to balance public and private sector because we hope that talent will come from the private sector. That you need the talent of Musk and Peter Thiel. That's how complicated national security is. So I'm a big votary of the private sector coming in. Anything else? Have I missed something? Yeah. All right.
Okay, I think we just have
Can I
time
just
enough.
make one more point? I'll just tell you how serious the challenge is. The saga of war fighting in Ukraine is precision. From javelins to HIMARS to attack cams, the American long-range strike, it's all about precision. Our ordnance factories are these ammunition behemoths which are producing dumb munitions. We have to make this huge transition to smart, precise munitions, which will depend on detectors, guidance codes, miniaturization, so on and so forth. I mean, it's going to take decades just to turn to precision. And that is why Atmanirbharta is really overhauling our defense industrial complex.
सर सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट समय कम है तो मैं चाहूंगा क्वेश्चंस भी प्रिसाइज रहे जवाब भी प्रिसाइज रहे प्लीज
General, good morning. My name is Amit Pratap Singh. Now the private participation in defense sector increasing year by year. And then following the equity pattern in investments, the big tycoons and conglomerates are coming into the defense sector. Don't you think this war, be it the Russia and Ukraine, or any probability as to the China and India or in near future, it's ultimately the tycoon and the business conglomerates are fighting the war and they are trying to make their money grow through the war.
So what's the question?
So is that not just the businessmen fighting? Nations are not fighting. These are the economic powers in private business. They are engaging in the war to make their money grow.
Okay, the question briefly is the influence of the MIC on government policy. That is his question. MIC is the military industrial complex. How much is it influencing policy and war making? Is that your question? Answer is 100% yes for America, not so much for India, no way. Thank you. We can discuss this. The influence of the American MIC, it's documented. Who has earned how much money, including in this war, the incredible, unimaginable profits made even by the oil companies of America. But in India, luckily, that is not the case. But the question is valid that with increasing private investment in the defense sector, is that a possibility? No, sir. We are structured with adequate terms and balances. Thank you for a lovely, vibrant question and answer session. It remains for me to thank General Raj Shukla for sharing his views with you, and I'm sure many of you will like to talk to him outside. He will be available here, right outside, to take on your questions, talk to you about his book, where he's written on this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Please, a big round of applause. I would now like to invite Mr. for Culture and Environment to please come forward and present a memento to our author and the discussant as a symbol of love and respect on behalf of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival 2022. This memento is the picture of a highly endangered bird called Lesser Florican, captured by Bhalu Mondeji. He has been with us and he's also had an exhibition of extremely beautiful pictures alongside. And there it is, our discussant, Brigadier Sanjay ji and Lieutenant General Raj Shukla ji. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for